How to start in property investing. Hey, my name is Chris Peel from Property Abundance, and you're joining me still in my hotel room because we're still running our 3-day flagship event. But while my business partner's on stage, I thought I'd run upstairs, get some content recorded, because we've had quite a few people messaging in to us recently to say, look, how can I get started in property investing? So that's exactly what we're going to cover in this video. We're going to deep dive this question. Now, the first step that you need to do when you want to invest into property is firstly decide in which area you want to invest. Now, what makes a good area? Well, there's several different kind of key features to this. The first one is you want to have an area of good demand. Okay, you want to be investing and setting up your properties in a place where you know you're either going to be able to get tenants if you're going down the tenant model, or where you're going to be able to get guests for your service departments if you're going to go down the service department model. So key point number one is make sure it's an area of good demand. Now, to go with that, you want to have an area with lots of available stock as well. We have to have what's called churn in the market. Now, if we don't have churn in the market, that means that properties don't come available often enough for us to be able to build a big, scalable, successful business. So there's got to be enough churn, enough properties being bought and sold, enough properties being listed for rent and rented. So you've got this churn in the market that you can benefit from. You know, if you invest in an area where a property only comes up for rent once every, like every year, for example, you're not going to be able to do enough deals to create a business that sustains you and can pay you a really good salary. So you want to make sure that there's lots of available stock and enough churn in your market that you can invest in as well. The third one is some good support systems. Now, this means people available to come and support you in your business. Things like cleaners, plumbers, electricians, handymen, people to fit doors, carpenters, that's the word I'm looking for. You want to have a town that's big enough and has these people around, because again, unless you want to do everything yourself, which is definitely not the route to growing a big successful business, then you need people around you to be able to bring into your business to provide that support. And you need a talent pool that you can recruit from, because again, thinking further down the line, when you're starting, you may not want to employ people because you're trying to keep costs down. But further down the line, you're going to need to build a team. So you want to be in an area where there's a big enough talent pool that you can find the right people for your business. You also want to have an area of strong pricing. Okay, so number 4 is strong pricing. Now that means that people are willing to pay a big enough price that it's actually worth your while and you can create a really profitable business from it. Now again, it's good to know your different markets. Now I had a business, but I sold it, and it was down in Rochester. It's one of my property businesses. And that business covered Rochester, Chatham, Gravesend, and Gillingham. And in the end, we actually decided to stop providing our service in Gillingham because although it's very close to Rochester and Chatham, it was not the same level of price. Okay, so the same room that we were achieving £500 a month for on the HMO model in Rochester was fetching just like £400 a month in Gillingham. Even though it's very close, it's a different market and different pricing. So instead, we decided we were going to focus our time, our effort, and our resources on sourcing more properties in the area that we knew we could get a premium. So focus on the areas with strong pricing is number 4. Number 5 is keep it local. Okay, and people from London, I'm especially talking to you. Okay, there's this big misconception that property investing in London just doesn't work because the yields aren't big enough. And it's just nonsense, okay? It's just nonsense. I built my property business exclusively in London to start with. These days we're in 7 different cities around the UK, but to start with, all we did was focus on London. Now, again, I see people from London all the time saying, well, I'm based in London, but I'm going to invest in Manchester or Newcastle because I hear the yields are better up there. And look, that's true, they are. But they're 8 hours away from you. You know, that every time you want to do a property deal or do a viewing, you've got to jump on a train for 8 hours or sit on the M6. Like, that's not a route to growing a scalable business if you've got to travel the length of the country every time you want to view it. Now, right at the start of your business as well, when you're starting, before you've got teams, before you've got employees, you're going to be doing most stuff yourself. So again, if you're in London and you source an HMO, let's say in, Liverpool, that's what, 5-6 hours drive? And then every time you want to go and source a new one, you've got to drive 5 or 6 hours. Anytime you want to show a prospective tenant round, you've got to drive 5 or 6 hours. Then your tenant locks themselves out and you've got to go and let them in. That's 5 or 6 hours. It's just not feasible. You're not going to grow anything scalable enough unless you outsource, from a lot of your operations from day one and have management companies in place, for example. So look, it's doable, but I don't recommend it. Keep it local, keep it hands-on, learn the lessons and do the things yourself to start with. Learn how you want them done, and then you can outsource them as well. So number 5 is to keep it local. And finally, number 6 is to assess what type of market you have. Okay, now when I say type of market, I mean, is it a market that's best suited for serviced accommodation? Because you've got lots of what we call transient demand, people come into the area, staying for a little bit and then going home. Is it better suited to HMO because there's lots of lower paid employment like warehousing, retail, hospitality, lots of these kind of jobs where people are more inclined to want to save money on their accommodation and pay less and therefore more likely to want to rent a room rather than a whole flat? Or is it kind of a family market where you should be aiming for the single let stuff? Now, the way you tell is if you've got, for serviced accommodation, if you've got lots of transient demand, so things like tourist attractions, business districts, hospitals, universities, these kind of things that bring teams to the area or people to the area to visit and then they go home, that's a good indication that you'll have short let demand. If you've got lots of industrial areas or warehousing areas, lots of distribution hubs, lots of manufacturing jobs, these areas of housing around these places are great for HMOs. And if you've got a much more suburban kind of nice schools in the area, sort of a location, then it's a much stronger kind of single let market where you get families wanting to live, people wanting to raise families there. Now, by the way, if you're finding this kind of content useful, please do me a massive favor and hit that like button. Drop me a comment of what is your area good for. Is it a serviced accommodation area? Is it an HMO area? Or are you going to focus on single lets? Which of those application strategies do you like the idea of most in your area based on the things that we just talked about? So please drop a comment and make sure you subscribe to this channel as well if you want to get lots of regular property related content tips straight out of my own 7-figure property business as well. So once we've chosen our area, we've then got to choose our acquisition method. Now the acquisition method is what we use to get the properties. So I generally break this down to, well, you either have money or you don't have money. Or let me say that again, a different way. You either have your own money or other people's money, or you don't have money or you haven't sourced other people's money yet. Okay, those are generally the two categories that I find people fall into. So if you have no money and you haven't yet sourced other people's money to be able to do deals with, if you haven't got investors on board, firstly, address that. And if you want to learn how to address that, check the link down below in the description, because you never want to be reliant on your own money in a property business. You need to learn how to work with investors. Otherwise, you put a massive cap on the amount that you can grow your business straight off the bat. But if you have no money and you haven't yet got investors on board, then the best strategy for you to start with is going to be to either follow the rent to rent method or set up a management service business. Now, with rent to rent, this is where you're going to rent somebody's property, get their permission to use it, and also have their permission to rent it out to your own client base. Now, whether that's a serviced accommodation client that's staying for a short let period, or whether it's an HMO client where you're going to have multiple people living in the same house, you need to have that permission from the owner. Now, once you do that, it's a concept of like buying wholesale and selling retail. You're going to rent the whole property for the whole month. So acquire wholesale, and then you're going to either rent out by the room or by the night to sell retail. And that's how you create these big margins. Now with a rent to rent deal, you want to be aiming to make around about £1,000 per month on average per property per month. Now look, some deals will be less, okay, and some deals will be a lot more. The biggest rent to rent I've ever done at the moment is £3,500 profit per month. So, and by the way, that's not the ceiling. I don't want you to think of that as like that's as much as you can do. I know people that have done even more than that. Okay, so rent to rent, there's really no limit on how big the deal can be. Now with management, it's slightly different. Okay, this is where you're going to take on the operation of somebody else's properties and run it for them for a fee. And your fees will be tied as a percentage of the revenue that you generate for that person. So let's say you were going to run someone's service department for them. You would deal with all the advertising, you deal with all the changeovers, the linen changes, the check-ins, the checkouts, dealing with any customer complaints, taking payments. And at the end of the month, you bundle up the amount that you've earned. You go, right, I've made £4,500 of revenue for this apartment owner. I'm going to take my cut, and fees generally range from about 10 to 15%. That's pretty typical. So you'd take your 10 or 15%, and then the rest, after you've paid for your costs, cost of cleaning, cost of linen, would then go to the owner of that property. So it's a great way for you to be able to get started with very little to no money. Now, if that's not you, if you're in a fortunate position that you've got some money saved up, or you've done the smart thing and you've got other people's money lined up, you've got some investors on board, then your options open up a little bit more. So look, you can still do rent to rent, you can still follow that strategy because it is a phenomenal return on investment. We're talking in excess of 100% ROI. So it's still a great source of placing your funds. However, you might want to do something a bit bigger because the average rent to rent deal is going to cost you 5 to 6, sometimes 7 or 8K. And if you've got 100K saved up, well, you've got to do a lot of deals to get all that invested. So you might want to look for something a bit bigger. So this is where we want to focus on strategies like buy, refurbish, refinance. So if you've managed to save up a deposit, you want to recycle that deposit and use it as many times as you can. So if you can buy a property for as little as possible, buy it as much below the market value as you possibly can by finding people with problems and offering solutions to those problems. Then you want to refurb this property, adding as much value to it as you can through things like extensions, title splitting, attic conversions, new kitchens and bathrooms, maximizing the bedroom space, maximizing the number of bedrooms, etc. If you can add a load of value by following these steps, then you can revalue the property. Let's say you've added, let's say you spend 150K on doing a refurb and you add, 300K to the value of the property in the process. That money that you've spent is worth much more than the cost of doing it. Okay, so it's created more value than it's cost to do. It's always got to be around about 2 to 1. Okay, £2 of value for every £1 spent. Then we need to refinance our property. Now that means we go to a mortgage provider who will loan you 75% of the new value of the property. So they'll give you 75% of the new value and you use that money that they then give you to pay off any development finance that you've taken out, to pay off any investor finance that you've used to acquire the property in the first place. And then guess what? The house is yours. Okay, and then you just pay your mortgage each month and you can either, single let it, HMO it, service department it. Just make sure obviously your mortgage company is aware of what you're going to be using the property for so you get the correct mortgage product. Loads of landlords out there just don't pay attention to mortgage rules and, that's their risk. That is a big risk as well. So make sure that your mortgage company, when you do the refinance, are aware of what the application strategy for that property is going to be. So once we understand we're going either for rent-to-rent management or we're going for a buy, refurb, refinance, we can then start to choose our sourcing methods. So you need to decide, are you going to work with agents? Are you going to try and work with agents on a rent-to-rent basis, which is, lots of people are doing now, and some agents are really open to it, but a lot aren't. So you have to accept the fact that if you are going to work with agents, you've got to go through the no's to get to the yeses. Or are you going to go direct to vendor and start marketing directly to landlords? Now, personally, I like to do both. Okay, I like to have a range of different sourcing activities. So I still do a lot of work with agents myself these days. A lot of my clients work with agents. We train them on how to get better at communicating what it is that they want to do to get through the no's and get to the yeses. Now, with the direct to vendors, we can use things like direct mail. We can use paid promotion, things like Facebook adverts, Google pay-per-click. We can set up adverts in various different formats to start attracting people to pick up the phone and call us and actually get these property leads in. We can use direct messaging. Okay, so a lot of landlords try and sell their properties or rent their properties themselves these days because they want to save on agency fees. So if we go into one of these networks where the landlords are doing it themselves, we can get direct to the landlord and start having those conversations. And to tie all this up together as well, I'd say just get out there and network. Business and property is a people's industry. Okay, property is very much a people's game. So you need to know more people. So get out there to networking events, start meeting more landlords, start meeting people looking to sell houses, start building up your contact database. There's a famous saying that says your network is your net worth. I think it was Napoleon Hill that said it first. Now that is one of these cliche sayings as well, but as cliche as it is, it's just so true. Okay, so get out there and meet more people. Now, once you set up your property, if you're not going to get your money back out, so if you're doing a buy and hold strategy, or if you're doing a rent-to-rent strategy, you've really got to maximize the value. Now, if you manage to do a buy, refurb, refinance and get all your money out, it's less pressure on how much cash flow that creates because you own the asset for life. But if you haven't got all your money back out and you need to continue to get the capital back out, or if you don't own the property like a rent-to-rent deal, or you want to manage people's property and therefore maximize your fees, you've got to use a high cash flow application strategy like HMOs where you rent it out by the room, or like service departments where you're going to rent the property out by the night. So Hopefully you found this super useful. If you want to learn tons more about this, there is so much more to learn. But if you want to grab a 30-minute free consultation call with one of my team, we are offering them right now. There's a link down below in the description where you can grab one of those 30-minute free consultation calls. And on that call, my team will get to grips with where you are right now, what kind of resources you've got to work with, and what you want to achieve. And we'll just make sure that you leave that call with absolute clarity on what your next steps are in order to progress towards your goals. So if you want to grab one of those free calls, the link is down below in the description. Other than that, guys, have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.